Hello, this is Phil Willett from Google. I'm here with Brett from Threshold Agency. They are a Google Premier Partner, and today we're talking about the digital journey in the housing industry. So, Brett, being a leader in the space and working with many brands within senior, student, and multifamily, I'd love to ask you a little bit about the typical journey in the housing industry and what do you think it looks like and how it's changing?
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, a lot of things change within the digital space constantly. One thing that hasn't changed is the way we look at the digital journey by stages. So going through those stages really quickly to kind of give you an overview of what we consider going into this digital journey within all of housing really begins with the awareness phase. So that's the question of, do they know who you are before they even start searching? So a lot of times what this is going to manifest through, or the channels in which affect that awareness phase, that's going to be things like word of mouth, which is really kind of the old school way of doing offline references and speaking about different options. But also what it's become today is things like reputation management. So as this person starts to kind of just look around for different housing options, are they being able to find you, first of all, from an SEO perspective? But also when they do find you, what are they seeing as far as other people's feedback? So as things like Google My Business start to take a larger role in this discovery or awareness phase, we need to make sure that we're considering those areas and making sure we're responding to reviews, making sure that tenant satisfaction is always being maintained. From that point, they go into what we call the consideration phase. So as that point starts to evolve, that person starts to say, okay, I'm looking at my different options, and I'm starting to consider which of those maybe 2 or 3 options that I'm going to start digging into. So at that point, the potential prospect is going to start looking at maybe reviewing your website to see what amenities do you have available. They may check your reputation management areas, so not just seeing the Google My Business rating, but maybe they're looking around in Yelp or apartments.com or any of those different reputation management sources within the housing industry. So again, that reputation management is making a presence. Additionally to this, what we're looking at is, are they checking your social channels to find out if you have community events going on? Are they going in and being aware of maybe email prospecting campaigns? So these are all influencing this potential prospect's decision on who are they actually going to go out and tour the property with? Who are they actually going to do follow-up actions to make sure that they are vetting these options? And this may vary depending on what industry you're in, on what they're actually looking at. When you move into the purchase phase, which is directly after the consideration phase, this is kind of coming into what's their experience of whether it's reaching out to ask about availability, or maybe it's, I want to schedule a tour online through a website. Is that an available option? So this really kind of comes down into how quickly can they get what they want done. Of course, this is also coming down to when the person comes to the property to actually submit that application or sign the lease. How easy is it for them to do that? Are they having to wait around for that lease to be printed out? And is your property staff making that an enjoyable experience? So those are all the different factors that come into the actual purchase phase. The next phase is what we consider service phase. So this kind of comes into, what is that person experiencing while they're living at your property? Are they getting those maintenance requests resolved on a timely basis? Are they being able to go out and pick up their packages when they're available? Or is there maybe a lack of staff during that they can't get to their packages? So all of these things roll up into their overall service phase, and that's going to be their overall kind of judgment of what it is to live at that property. Additionally, what they go into is what we call the loyalty phase. So the easiest way to understand this is, how likely is that person to re-sign with your community or your apartment complex? So again, that is going to be influenced by their service phase of what was their experience living there. So within this loyalty phase, things like renewal programs are a big piece, or potentially making sure that we capitalize on that person's experience. If they had a great experience, are we capturing that phrase and making sure we use that to market the property out whenever you actually have a positive statement from a tenant. Lastly is the advocacy phase. So after that loyalty of what are we doing to either get their renewal or getting a satisfaction survey out there, what can we do to empower this person to be an advocate? So after they live at the property, are they telling their friends and family how much they loved living at this property and why? That's really a full circle piece whenever they can refer a friend in or be able to speak to this property in a positive way that then plugs it into the awareness of the next prospect. So you can see that this is a very much of a cyclical approach that we try to look at whenever people are truly trying to find a new apartment or home within the housing industry.
Yeah, that's great, Brett. I really like how you've painted a picture about the different phases, especially how it looks today.
Absolutely.
So now that we've talked about how the housing industry and the digital journey is today, a question for you is, how do you feel the digital journey has changed from the last 10 years?
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, there's a lot of things that changed. I'm going to talk about a few primary areas that have changed, and then we'll get into some of the implications. But starting out, and I've already mentioned this once, is reputation management. That is not something that really was extremely prevalent 10 years ago. That is something that people have become trusting of, and now they will look it up as they start considering an option. So this is now something that 10 years ago, maybe if you had an issue with a tenant and it didn't resolve in maybe the best way, that may have impacted 5 of that individual's friends. But in today's age, with reputation management being a permanent online aspect, that bad experience will continue to hurt you over time if it's not addressed. So that is a very large change within the housing industry, that we have to make sure that we're on top of these issues and we're providing the best customer service as we can. And on these online reputation websites, that means responding to issues that people are submitting, trying to take that conversation offline. Whenever there is a resolution found, making sure that we communicate to the user if they did have a good experience, to make sure that they're going back and rather either augmenting that review or responding that there was a great resolution found. In addition to this, the way that we're actually searching for housing is shifting fundamentally. In previous, 10 years ago in 2009, an individual may go ahead and drive around a community to see what all their apartment options are. They may only go and look at the apartment options that they're aware of. Well, fast forward to today, that is a much more empowered user. That is someone that has a lot more resources at their fingertips. So not only are they able to look up more information about the properties that they're aware of, but they can now look at an area and find all the options that exist. One thing that we're seeing a lot more of and a rising adoption rate is that people are conducting searches through the maps. So if you think about that, whenever someone goes to a map, maybe on your phone, if you go to Google Maps and you type in apartments within an area, that's now going to pop up a list of different options, whether it's pins on the map or maybe the list of GMB, depending on if you're on desktop or mobile. But now this may be the first interaction that your property has with a prospect. So how are you presenting yourself on Google My Business? And how well does that portray the quality of your property? Since this is the first engagement, that may make or break that prospect's decision whether they want to even pursue the option of that property further. And so what we're seeing is that people are really making their own journey. And what that means too, and we'll talk about a little bit of the different industries and their expectations, but a lot more people are looking for more from their online journey. That may not only be the list of amenities you have on your website, but maybe the people are looking for the ease of use of saying, okay, I'm on your website and I'm bought in as you as an option. Well, the immediate action they'd love is, okay, I now want to set up a tour. Well, all of certain generations and different industries, they may say, hey, I'd like to set up that tour online right now, whereas maybe a different industry may say, hey, I want to pick up the phone and and call this business and set up a tour. What's important is making sure you have addressed all needs. So having a click to call option on your website, also having a easy set up a tour where they can select the time they would like to come in and tour. That's the kind of ease of use in the journey that's extremely critical for these users, so they're not getting a jarring experience and they're deciding to go ahead and pursue your apartment complex or housing option a little bit further.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's great how you talked about the digital journey, but also the user experience once they land on the page. So appreciate that.
Great.
So we talked a little bit about the digital journey and how it's evolved over the past 10 years with different consideration phases. What would you say are some of the key differences within the different industries and audience behavior?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic. I think 10 years ago, we may have looked at housing in a very similar way, whether it was student or multifamily or even senior communities. We really saw it as a one-size-fits-all. What we're starting to see is more of a bifurcation of those industries and how they're approached. I think the biggest difference, or I should say the industry that shows the biggest different behaviors within it is the student industry. And I think anybody that has worked in the student housing business understands that. First of all, it's extremely, extremely seasonal. And I think anybody you talk to in the industry would completely agree that that seasonal demand is largely dependent on the student semester. As you can expect, December is a very slow month for student housing. A lot of those students are going back home for the winter break. So how are we applying that into our actual marketing strategy, and how are we leveraging that information? Are we modifying budgets so that we maybe reallocate from December back into January to make sure we're getting the most bang for your buck? Within multifamily, what we're really seeing is one piece is price conscious. In multifamily, they have a different approach to how they make their decision. Whereas in student, they may be more focused on those amenities or how close they are to the university. Whereas in multifamily, they may not be looking at amenities as hard, but they're saying, okay, I want to be in this general location, but I really want to stay under this price point. So that's going to be playing a larger role within multifamily, is looking at price point first, maybe location secondary, and then amenity is more of a tertiary concern when you're looking at the multifamily sector. Lastly is really the senior community and the senior housing community. What we're finding here is that there are multiple differences, everything from is the actual tenant the one doing research, or is it the adult child, which is the child of that person, conducting the research on their behalf? And how does that affect how we should approach our marketing within the senior housing? What I can say is amongst the senior housing group, what we see is, first and foremost, a want to take the conversation offline as quickly as possible. This is very different than what we see in student, where they want to avoid maybe having a conversation and they want to do everything they can online, whether it's setting up a tour, getting the information about the property, getting rental rates, availability. They're looking to do all of that on the website. Whereas what we see from senior is they want to evaluate, is this a valid option within my senior or active community options? Is the price point right? And is the location what I'm looking for? So when you think about that, think about what you're looking at as far as a senior website. What does that look like? Well, first and foremost, it needs to have a way to contact the property directly and quickly. Oftentimes, that's a click to call. They're picking up the phone and reaching out to set up that tour. Alternatively, if we know that they're looking to move to a tour as soon as they think that this is a qualified option of housing, well, how easy is it for them to do it? Is it clear that they can set up a tour very quickly through a button? Or is that going to be nested somewhere in your website that may be a little less intuitive whenever they're going through their journey? So there's a lot of different variations within here as far as how they're finding places, what they're deciding within that consideration phase as far as their actions. For example, again, student looking to have that more online, fully inclusive experience versus senior looking to kind of talk to a real person as soon as they decide this is an option. So there's quite a few differences amongst these industries, and I don't see that slowing down anytime soon.
That's great. I think you've shared some great insights in terms of the different industries and audience behavior. Knowing a lot of that, where do you see the digital journey in housing going? Is it also different for each industry?
Absolutely. So kind of referencing some of the differences back, starting with student. So again, what I had mentioned is looking for the ease of use through technology. I think an easy example of that is tour scheduling or online availability of certain floor plans. A lot of times they're looking to find out, hey, I'm looking for a 2-2. Do they even have any 2-2s available for me to go and tour? So this is becoming a very distinct industry, subset of the industry being student. And what I see is that is only going to increase. So a lot of the areas that this could increase as far as creating a more holistic online journey, you see this in virtual tours. We're creating now virtual experiences for them to walk the floor plan, to take a look and experience the floor plan before they commit to actually coming in person and touring. Also thinking about, we're seeing behaviors in the student industry evolve to where, for example, students are searching later at night. Previously, 10 years ago, that may have been between 7 and 10 p.m. We're seeing some markets as late as midnight to 2 a.m. that the students are starting to conduct their search. So whenever you see that information, you have to start thinking about how are you presenting yourself as a property at 2 a.m. in the morning when there's no staff on hand. Well, are you using a chatbot? And does that chatbot display itself as a real person? Is it able to answer questions? There's some sophisticated chatbots out there that can do things from saying, I can answer whether a floor plan's available. I can answer when move-in dates are available. So think about your sophistication of the technology you currently have in place and what it means to this, because the last thing you want to do is have a prospect reach out at 2 a.m. thinking that someone else is on the other end of that chat, and they get a bad experience because they find out it's a bot in the end, and you presented yourself as another human was on the other end. So I think student is a very interesting subset of the market that's moving to more of a automated approach across the board. Going into kind of multifamily and what we're seeing there, what I would say is a larger rise of potentially smaller apartment complexes that may not have invested in marketing previously. That now we're seeing some saturation in markets, that now those potentially Class B and Class C or smaller properties are now having to become competitive on the marketing front. So the question really is, off of maybe a smaller marketing budget allocated to a smaller multifamily property is, how do you really make the most out of that budget that's available? Maybe that is cleaning up your reputation management sources, or maybe it is looking to creating some small search campaigns that are very refined in matching you up for certain aspects that your users are looking at that are great matches. That may just be a $500 search campaign that's delivering those lower funnel leads that people are saying, hey, my behavior says I'm looking for an apartment right now, and what are you doing to get in front of it? So multifamily, I do see a rise in competition, that more properties are becoming active in this space. And I think the key in that industry vertical is really saying, what can we do to make the most impact with the budget we have available? Lastly is senior, and this is a huge industry, or I should say a huge up-and-coming industry. Not just with the boomer generation approaching that retirement age and looking to more active communities or active senior living. We're also seeing a rise in the overall marketing spend within those. So one aspect of senior living that I would put forth as a proponent of the journey of how it's evolving or how the properties are evolving to address those changes is, what are we doing to create a website that's extremely intuitive for these individuals and provides education. I think there's a lot of room for education within the senior active communities. and really defining what that is. I think there's so many different categories within senior living, from assisted living to active communities. And it's really important to define that on your website to say really who you are, what a tenant can expect to live there, and make it easy for them to be able to process this as a great option to have them come and tour, and really put the decision in the hands of your on-site staff during that tour of making sure they understand what is the culture and the experience of the property. So senior is a very much new to the market. I do see that competition will continue to rise, but I think it's very important for us to take a step back and say, what is the audience of senior communities, that may be the tenant or the adult child, what they're looking to get from the website and the digital journey before they come in person and start engaging with the property on property.
That's great insight. Now that you've shared a little bit of insight into each of those different industries and the digital journey within, curious, like, what are some of the technologies that you think the housing industry should focus on?
Absolutely. There are a long list of technologies, to say the least, that influence all these different evolutions in the journey. I think there's some key ones that could be low-hanging fruit, that are, areas that may only take a small amount of effort, but result in a lot of improvement on that journey, no matter what housing industry vertical you're in. So starting out, I would say Google My Business. That is one area that is just taking a large role in the overall discovery or research phase in all housing. And one of the areas that I see that, and I spoke to it a little bit earlier, is when people are doing discovery searches on maps and they may just type in apartments with a certain area of the city highlighted. Well, if they do see that option pop up and your Google My Business listing shows up, well, that individual, again, their first experience is going to be on your Google My Business page. So do you have photos that are flattering to your property? Do you have maybe user photos that maybe aren't so flattering? Are there reviews on there that go unresponded? Have you filled out the question and answers area of Google My Business? There's all of these areas that, if you think about it too, from an organic search perspective, now if you're on desktop and you type in apartments in Seattle, well, that's going to come up with a knowledge pane potentially on that desktop search that shows all of the options on a map. If you do select one of those options, again, you're back to your Google My Business page. So these are becoming ancillary or alternative online presence that you didn't necessarily build. But it's an important thing for you to make sure they're upkept and reflecting your brand correctly. An additional piece I would say, and kind of falls into that same vein, is really AdWords. And what I mean by that is Google Ads within the search space. And why I pull that up is that is one of the lowest funnel tactics that you can actually put in play. And what I mean by that is they're providing a signal to us that says, hey, I am ready to lease an apartment. I am looking for my next place to live. And oftentimes those signals are hard to find within the journey, but we can absolutely capitalize that in AdWords search. So if you're not running Google Ads right now, I highly recommend looking into that to at least see, can I supplement my current marketing efforts, maybe with some warmer leads that I can put in the hands of my on-property staff and have them do that personal outreach. Additionally, YouTube advertising. I think this is one that it seems very high barrier of entrance, whenever it comes to creating a video asset. That just seems like such a Goliath task at times. But what I can say is there are alternatives to creating easy to use video assets, that may be taking your static images, and that may be leveraging that back into a video asset template. Maybe that is taking a small promotional video of a drone fly over the property. Whatever it may be, don't let the creating of the video asset hold you up from all of the options you have within YouTube. I think starting out, one no-brainer is running YouTube retargeting campaigns. So what that's really doing is first off, that's only going to be targeting those individuals that have visited your site so that we know that there's a little bit more pre-qualification there. Also, it allows you to engage with that user on multiple platforms. That is an extremely important facet of advertising, is not just continually hit them on a Google Ads only, but it's important to say, are you rolling a display retargeting? Are you rolling even a Facebook retargeting in there? And then additionally, YouTube, and not just the channel, but the media format. It's a very key thing is to not show them the same ad, or maybe it's a static ad every time. Well, I'm going to show them a search ad when they're searching, but when they're going back on YouTube and browsing content, I'm also going to engage them with a video. Video just continues to skyrocket as the preferred media platform. You see more engagement, you see more views. So I highly recommend looking into that YouTube side of things if you haven't already, and considering alternatives to creating a full-blown YouTube ad that may be expensive to create the asset, but there are alternatives that allow you to create affordable and reasonable prices on creating those assets to run campaigns with. Additionally, I would say lead nurturing technologies would be a large piece. I think this, when I was talking about senior and also multifamily, it's not just making sure we respond to that initial inquiry from the prospect. It's about how are we doing following up? How are we letting them know, hey, that offer or that price point that we discussed on your tour, it expires in 7 days. So would you like to go ahead and get your application in? A lot of times apartments and different communities may have a shoestring staff. Maybe the staff on site is not able to get to that follow-up. The thing to think about is, what other technologies do we have to supplement that? There are a vast number of email marketing technologies or CRM technologies that help you with this and help you go ahead and set up that reminder. So if you're not currently leveraging one of those, I highly recommend looking into it, not only for your customer's sake and making sure they have a great experience, but also for your on-site staff. If we can take that time out of their day to where they're not doing follow-ups, they can help the current tenants have that much better experience. Lastly, I would say things like chatbots, ways, again, that you can get that user information in the channel they're looking for. So again, I think of student housing here. So somebody saying, going to the website and wanting to know, is there a 2-2 floor plan available in this date range of move-in? That is something that doesn't necessarily have to come from a human. That is one option that we have. If we can set it up in the CRM, we can answer that question right off the bat and not have any issues, and even, again, take that time off of that on-site staff and let them focus on truly making a great experience for the tenants that currently live there.
That's great. I really agree with touching on multiple touch points and your viewpoint there. Awesome. So we talked a lot about the digital journey regarding the different phases, how it's changed in the past 10 years, where it's at now, and even some of the technology that you'd recommend. What would you say are the 3 main takeaways that someone can get out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of takeaways, I hope. But if I had to kind of boil it down to 3 key takeaways, I think first off, this is something I haven't mentioned much here, but measuring your different marketing channels and really what your ROI is on that, so return on investment. So within Google Ads, looking at how much cost per conversion is occurring there versus maybe a Facebook campaign. And then also, what can you do to track them deeper into the journey? Is there potentially attribution pieces that you can add to start comparing those? So I think first and foremost is to get a good understanding of what you're currently doing and what's working and what's not. I think a lot of the times we are very prone to seeing that something worked last year and assuming it's going to work this year. And I think it's key to make sure that every year we're evaluating each channel on its performance, not just our opinion of the platform. Following that kind of thread is making sure you're observing and enabling new technologies to emerge. Sometimes these technologies may not be a pure For example, media spend. Understanding how those new technologies fit into the overall customer journey, and can it make a big difference on converting those leads you're already driving in. So what I mean by that is, ease of scheduling a tour on the website. That may not have any direct monetary trackable, I made X amount more from this, but by you addressing the customer journey and making it more enjoyable and easy to use, you're now taking those thousand pieces of paid traffic to your site. You're now making it easier to convert. You may see a rise in overall conversions or lower in bounce rate. You really need to think about, what technology am I bringing in? What's its purpose? And is it influencing any measurable action, whether it's on the website, whether it's your conversion rate of your campaigns? But finding out and determining what its impact is expected to be, and then measuring it against it. Excuse me. Last thing I would say is think holistically. It's so easy to dive into one of these channels and get lost. And, hard to see the forest through the trees kind of thing. You really have to take a step back and say, what are my users doing? What are they actually looking for? And if I take X action of whether it's introducing a chatbot or launching a new YouTube campaign, what is it affecting in the overall customer journey as a whole? And then also thinking about the housing as different industries. I've already pointed out a couple of differences between student and multifamily and senior. But what I'd say is there is a whole different breakdown underneath each of those verticals that are worth considering. Within student, is this a luxury property, or is this potentially a functional property? And if that is the case, how does that affect the way that we highlight and market these properties? How does that affect what audiences we're going after? So I would say, think holistically of all of your marketing programs working together, and is there a way you can improve the customer journey that will just allow you to gain even more results from the current efforts that are being put in?
That's great. I appreciate you sharing all your viewpoints there. We recognize Threshold Agency as a Google Premier Partner and lean on you guys for a lot of these insights. So thank you for sharing. If a management company or if there's an ownership company listening to this, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so thanks, Phil. You're welcome to reach out to us via email at connect@thresholdagency.com, or feel free to visit our website at thresholdagency.com. Drop us a line in our contact form, or feel free to review all of our great creative examples and case studies, and reach out to us, and we would love to talk.